What would happen if suddenly the Earth lost its atmosphere? No warning, no chance of reaction. You take a deep breath and realize something is wrong. The air disappears from the lungs. Your body goes into shock. The sky, once blue, becomes a dark, lifeless void. The sun's heat burns your skin mercilessly, while the temperature around you plummets to freezing levels. You try to scream, but the sound is no longer there. Everything happens too fast. Your blood boils, your eyes burn, and within seconds, your body is no longer able to withstand the collapse. Now look around you. The world as we know it is dissolving before your eyes. The oceans begin to evaporate, turning into gigantic columns, of vapor that are launched into space. Without atmospheric pressure, buildings collapse, life disappears, and the Earth becomes a dead planet. Without oxygen, without protection, with no way out. But that's not the worst. There are cosmic forces that can trigger this event suddenly and irreversibly. If this happened now, would humanity have any chance of survival? Comment below. Do you think the Earth could already be losing its atmosphere without us realizing it? What could trigger this event, and what would be the consequences? I want to know your opinion. But before reaching any conclusions, you need to understand what would happen in the first seconds of this collapse. What would your body feel? What would really happen to the planet? The answer is disturbing. Earth's atmosphere is the only thing separating our planet from the unforgiving vacuum of space. Without it, the Earth's surface would be constantly bombarded by deadly radiation, extreme temperatures and cosmic impacts that would make life impossible. But despite its importance, few people truly understand how this invisible barrier works and why its stability is essential for the survival of everything we know. This layer of gases that surrounds the planet is not there by chance. It is mainly composed of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and small amounts of other elements, forming a dynamic system that regulates the climate, maintains the pressure necessary for the existence of liquid water, and protects against solar radiation and cosmic rays. Divided into layers, the atmosphere acts as a multi-level shield. The troposphere, where we live, is responsible for controlling temperature and storing the oxygen we breathe. Above it, the stratosphere contains the ozone layer, which blocks most of the ultraviolet rays emitted by the sun. Without this barrier, the effects would be immediate. Direct exposure to solar radiation would cause severe genetic mutations, while the lack of atmospheric pressure would prevent any living being from surviving on the surface. Oxygen, essential for breathing and biological processes, would escape into space, making it impossible for any form of life to exist in the way we know it. The influence of the atmosphere goes far beyond breathing. It regulates the global temperature, preventing the sun's heat from excessively heating the planet during the day, and all this heat from being lost during the night. Mars, for example, has an extremely thin atmosphere, unable to retain heat, which results in extreme temperature variations in a matter of hours. On the Moon, where the atmosphere is practically non-existent, the difference between the illuminated side and the shadow side can reach hundreds of degrees. The Earth, however, remains in a thermal balance that supports life, and this is only possible because of the presence of atmospheric gases that absorb and redistribute energy. Another essential role of the atmosphere is protection against space impacts. Every day, fragments of cosmic rocks enter the atmosphere, but most of them disintegrate before reaching the ground. Without this barrier, any object coming from space would collide directly with the surface, causing damage that could be devastating. The stability of this layer is not guaranteed forever. Small imbalances can trigger unpredictable reactions, compromising the planet's natural protection. But if the atmosphere is so essential, what would happen if it simply disappeared? How would the human body react in the first seconds of this change? The impact would be instantaneous, and the effects irreversible. The disappearance of the atmosphere would not give time for reactions. The human body, adapted to living under a specific atmospheric pressure, would collapse as soon as this protection was removed. In the first few seconds, the oxygen dissolved in the blood would begin to evaporate, causing an immediate sensation of suffocation, even if the person tried to breathe. There would be no air, there would be no resistance against the vacuum. The lungs would expand uncontrollably, causing fatal internal damage. The absence of pressure would also affect the physical integrity of the body. The liquid present in the eyes, mouth, and skin would begin to boil due to the sudden change in environment, leading to extreme pain and rapid loss of consciousness. In a matter of seconds, blood flow would be interrupted, and the body's cells would collapse. Contrary to what many imagine, the human body would not explode, but the internal swelling and lack of oxygenation would make any attempt at resistance impossible. At the same time, something even stranger would happen. The sound would disappear completely. Without air to carry the vibrations, any scream, explosion, or noise would cease to exist. The world would become an environment of absolute silence, where nothing could be heard. This abrupt change would affect not only communication, but also the perception of movement and danger, as sound is an essential tool for spatial orientation. Body temperature would begin to drop rapidly. The heat radiated by the body would not find resistance in the environment and would dissipate directly into space. Unlike the common cold, this thermal drop would occur unevenly, as direct exposure to the sun would heat one side of the body, while the other would freeze in a few minutes. The result would be an extreme thermal shock, capable of further accelerating organ failure. Have you ever stopped to think about how much we trust in what we can't see? The atmosphere is around us, all the time, invisible, silent, essential. But what if she disappeared now? The feeling of security we have may just be an illusion. Science has already discovered that cosmic events, changes in the composition of the air, and even unknown experiments can affect this barrier that keeps us alive. Few people know this, and when this type of knowledge doesn't spread, the right questions stop being asked. Your like has a greater impact than you imagine. It makes this type of content reach more people, keeping the discussion alive about the mysteries of the universe and the dangers that we may be ignoring. But if humanity would collapse in the first few seconds without an atmosphere, what would happen to the planet? Would the oceans simply evaporate? Would the landscapes we know transform into something unrecognizable? The answer is even more extreme than you might think. The oceans are immense, covering more than 70% of the Earth's surface. But their existence depends on an invisible factor, atmospheric pressure. Without this pressure, the water would instantly boil. The process would begin in the first few meters of the surface, where liquid water would no longer be able to remain stable. Within minutes, gigantic columns of vapor would begin to rise, creating dense clouds that would be launched directly into space. This vapor, however, would not accumulate in the atmosphere, as it would no longer exist. All moisture would escape into the vacuum, accelerating the loss of the oceans. But this effect would not be uniform. The deepest parts of the oceans, where the pressure of the water itself would still maintain some temporary stability, would gradually collapse. Smaller lakes and rivers would evaporate almost immediately, while shallow seas would become masses of boiling water, releasing bubbles of gas before disappearing completely. Without the vast blue oceans, the Earth's surface would begin to change. The land that was previously submerged would become an arid landscape, marked by immense gorges where there were once ocean beds. The sea currents, which regulated the planet's temperature, would cease to exist, creating a completely unknown environment for what was left of the planet. Without an atmosphere, most life forms would quickly disappear. The disappearance of oxygen would make breathing impossible for any organism that depended on this element, but the lack of pressure and direct exposure to radiation would be even more devastating. Mammals, reptiles, birds, and any other land animal would succumb without resistance. The oceans, which were once home to much life, would have already evaporated, eliminating fish and aquatic organisms. But the complete disappearance of life would not happen instantly. Unlike more complex animals, certain microorganisms have extreme adaptation abilities. Some bacteria and archaea, known as extremophiles, already live in environments where life seemed impossible. Organisms that can withstand high doses of radiation could continue to exist for a limited time, especially those that already live in deeper layers of the soil or within resistant minerals. Some species already found in isolated caves could temporarily resist the chaos on the surface. But even these life forms would face an impossible challenge: the absence of a functional biological cycle. Without a balanced environment to provide stable nutrients, temperature, and energy, no life form could continue to reproduce and evolve. What would remain would be traces of organisms that were once adaptable, but which, faced with an unrecognizable planet, would end up disappearing completely. If not even the most resilient beings could survive for long, does this mean that Earth would become a completely dead planet? Or was there some way to reverse this collapse? Some possibilities suggest that recovering the atmosphere may be more difficult than imagined. The universe is full of secrets that we still cannot decipher. With each new discovery, more questions arise than answers. Now I want to hear from you. What crazy theory about the cosmos has crossed your mind? It can be something absurd, mysterious, or even scary. Comment here because some of these ideas may be explored in a future video. But what if what we just discussed wasn't just a hypothesis? Some scientists warn that changes in the Earth's atmosphere are already happening, and there are signs that indicate that something may be slowly altering the planet's balance. Are we ignoring a phenomenon that has already begun? You will see surprising clues below. Without an atmosphere, Earth would no longer be just a planet vulnerable to cosmic radiation and would become a true target for space impacts. Every day, thousands of small rock fragments reach the Earth's atmosphere, but they rarely reach the ground as they disintegrate before they even complete their fall. However, without this natural barrier, nothing would prevent these space rocks from colliding directly with the planet's surface. The first impacts would be smaller but constant. Meteors the size of cars and buildings would fall without resistance, opening craters and throwing debris around. The soil, previously protected against atmospheric erosion, would begin to erode rapidly. But the real threat would come from larger asteroids. With speeds of tens of kilometers per second, these celestial bodies would reach the surface, releasing absurd amounts of energy, generating explosions equivalent to multiple nuclear bombs. Unlike what happens today, where most impacts are softened by air resistance, these events would cause absolute destruction, shaping the planet's geography in an irreversible way. Mountains could be pulverized, entire regions devastated, and any remaining structures of civilization would be completely eradicated. The Earth would become progressively similar to the Moon or Mars, with its surface marked by scars from successive collisions. In addition to the direct impact, another factor would make the situation even more worrying. Without air resistance, asteroids would not lose speed before hitting the ground, drastically increasing the damage caused by each collision. Space rocks that, under normal conditions, would cause destruction only locally, could trigger global extinction events. If Earth's atmosphere were lost, could it regenerate naturally, or would the planet be doomed forever? The answer is not simple. Unlike cyclical processes such as ocean renewal or vegetation regeneration, the atmosphere cannot simply return. When gases are dissipated into space, there is no natural mechanism to bring them back. But that doesn't mean Earth would have no chance of recovery. For a new atmosphere to emerge, the planet would need a massive source of gases. Some hypotheses suggest that extreme cosmic events could trigger this process. Impacts from large comets or asteroids, depending on their composition, could release significant amounts of vapor and chemical compounds, temporarily creating a thin, gaseous layer. However, without a magnetic field strong enough to hold these gases, this new atmosphere could quickly dissipate, just as happened on Mars billions of years ago. Another possibility would be a period of extreme volcanic activity. Some planets, even without an atmosphere, have active volcanoes that expel gases such as sulfur dioxide and water vapor. If such a phenomenon were to occur on a global scale, a new atmosphere could begin to form. However, without adequate atmospheric pressure to trap these gases, they could escape into space before creating a stable layer. Furthermore, an atmosphere composed mostly of volcanic gases would be extremely toxic, making the planet uninhabitable. For millions of years, what you just saw is not just a hypothesis. Earth's atmosphere is fragile, and cosmic changes can happen at any moment. Few people truly understand how we depend on this invisible barrier to stay alive. Now you are part of the group that knows the truth. And knowledge like this cannot be trapped. It needs to be shared, could temporarily resist the chaos on the surface. Send this video now to that friend who loves scientific theories and mysteries of the universe. Let's spread this discussion and bring more people to this conversation. If the atmosphere disappeared, the Earth would become a cosmic graveyard. But what about humans? Could we escape this fate? Some scientists believe there is only one chance of survival. But the price would be high. Would humanity be willing to pay? What comes next could completely change the way you imagine our future. If the atmosphere disappeared, humans would be forced to find alternatives to survive. But how can we live on a planet that no longer offers any protection? The scenario would require extreme solutions, and each choice would bring challenges that were impossible to predict. The most immediate adaptation would be the construction of underground shelters. Far from the surface, exposed to radiation and extreme temperatures, these refugees could provide a more controlled environment, but life below ground would not be easy. Food would need to be produced without sunlight. Water would have to be extracted and purified from underground sources, and resources would become increasingly scarce. In the long term, these shelters could become true closed cities, where the last human generations would try to resist the end of the world. Another possibility would be to create survival domes, gigantic sealed structures that would attempt to recreate an artificial environment within limited areas of the surface. But this technology would require constant maintenance, and any failure could be fatal. Relying on machines to generate oxygen, purify water, and maintain a stable temperature, humanity would be trapped in a fragile bubble, where a simple mistake could mean total extinction. But if living on Earth became impossible, the only option left would be to flee. The idea of abandoning the planet may seem extreme, but without an atmosphere and a viable life support system, it would only be a matter of time before the last survivors faced ultimate collapse. Space colonies or attempting to terraform another planet could be a way out, but that would mean starting civilization over from scratch in an even more unknown environment. The big question would not only be how to survive, but how long could we resist? Would humanity have enough time to develop a solution before all resources were exhausted? Some scientists believe this threat may be more real than we realize, and there are signs that changes in the atmosphere have already begun. What we are ignoring could be exactly what will define our destiny. The atmosphere has always been here, invisible and silent, protecting us from the chaos of the universe. But what if this security was only temporary? Scientists already know that Earth's atmosphere is not indestructible, and small changes can trigger irreversible transformations. Are we really safe, or are we just ignoring signs that might indicate something is already happening? If this scenario one day becomes reality, humanity would face the greatest challenge of its existence. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to try to survive on a planet without air? How do you think the last survivors would deal with this collapse? I want to see your theories in the comments, but this is just the beginning. Exploring these mysteries means going beyond what we have been taught, questioning the impossible and facing the unknown. Here, each answer leads to new questions, and there is much more waiting to be discovered. If you want to continue unraveling the greatest mysteries of the universe, sign up now. Being part of this community means having access to theories and discoveries that challenge everything we know. Each video is a new step towards understanding the unknown. What's next? It's not just a mystery. It's something that can shake everything we believe to be true. Some answers comfort us, but others make us question whether we are really prepared for what is to come. If this has already surprised you, the next video may make you see the universe in a way you never imagined, and perhaps change your perception of reality forever.